Recording, and
This meeting is
we'll
being
take it.
recorded.
There we go. Super duper. So, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our SIG HPC education event, which is to discuss and to hear from some of our colleagues about issues around generative AI in HPC education and training. My name is Martin Callahan. I'm an academic at the Open University in the UK, and I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues who I'll introduce in a few moments. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to have two talks, one from colleague Georgia and another from David very soon. They're going to tell us about some initiatives that they're working on at their various institutions. And then we've got some time later on in the session to discuss what your thoughts are, what's happening at your places, and what we can do next as an organisation and how we can support you. And I guess more to the point, how we can support each other. So without any further ado, I'm going to pass over to Georgia in a few moments. And Georgia's going to talk about a project that she's working on, centering humans while enhancing HPC facilitation with AI chatbots, a framework for evaluation. And if you've not met Georgia before, so Georgia is a researcher at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and alongside lots of other academic activities, she leads facilitation for their Unity High Performance Compute platform, which is a collaborative HPC group from 9 partner institutions in New England. It's got a big interest in HPC workflows, but also in how people interact with HPC systems, which I guess is going to be a fairly big part of this talk, and uncertainty quantification. And Georgia's currently leading on an NSF regional compute grant, deploying a Kubernetes cluster aimed at supporting educational, persistent, and a whole bunch of high throughput workloads. Okay, so Georgia, I'm going to hand over to you. Got about 10 minutes, and you're going to tell us all about your project.
All right, I'm going to swap to my screen share if that's all right.
Yep, I'm going to work out how to unshare me. Stop sharing. There we go. Over to you.
All right, can you see my screen now?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, great. The work I'm going to talk about today is primarily led by my student Angela Rasool, so I'm listing her as primary author on this talk because it's a modification of a talk she wrote for supercomputing last month. So the context for this talk is we lead a facilitation team that it helps users on the Unity High Performance Computing platform, which, as Martin mentioned, is a collaborative platform with 9 member institutions. So you can imagine the support burden for that is quite high, especially since we really try to encourage equitable access to research computing, and anybody who is associated with research at any of the institutions is allowed to access the cluster. So we are looking at ways of enhancing our human support without replacing it. So that's the overall context for what we're doing here. Today, I'll talk about just a little bit of background, the problem of our practice, some research questions, and refining some research materials. I will not do every slide in this talk. I've modified it a little bit, but if you're interested in the full talk, I'm happy to share that after. So our Unity is located at the MGHPCC here in Massachusetts. We primarily support research activities, but recently we've been moving into more educational initiatives too. So allowing more formal classes on Unity, setting up access for workshops, and with that addition of more classes and workshops and students who may not be involved in research all day, every day, the support burden for that has increased as well. So it has added an extra layer of importance to figuring out how to extend our human team beyond what we're currently capable of. Our users need assistance with issues ranging from stuff like logging in, managing files, setting up SSH keys correctly, all the way up to complex code and workflow optimization. So what we are trying to accomplish with this chatbot is really taking that kind of first level of support. So when you go up to the complex code and workflow optimization questions, that's something that a human facilitator is probably always going to be integral to. But we're identifying that lower level of like, how do I set up my SSH key as the primary target for something that could potentially have automation added to it. So we are looking at this with 4 different levels. Right now we go up to level 3. We have this user facilitation that provides support on Slack and ticketing, and a pretty extensive level of support at that. And now we're looking at deploying that AI chatbot to accurately field those lower complexity questions. One thing that we are being extremely careful about with our AI design is avoiding some common pitfalls. So frequently with chatbots, as anybody who has used Google lately knows, it can often hallucinate answers. It can give you wrong information or just lead to incorrect understanding of the material. And with chatbots in particular, who are in this space of user support, we have the additional layer of user frustration added. So I know that I've had the experience of being connected to a chatbot on a website that I'm trying to get support from, and just trying to ask repeatedly, like, can I please have a human intervene in my problem and let me avoid this loop of trying to make a bot understand what I want. So with that context, we want to avoid undue user frustration for our users, and we want to make sure that they are transparently seeing like where this information is coming from and can trust what it is telling them. So we're looking at how we analyze the AI-human interactions, and we are trying to avoid the frustrating communication problems that occur from it. One framework that we're evaluating to do this is human-centered AI, so HCAI. And that's really centered around human-centered design in computing. So human-centered design has been around for a long time that predates AI significantly, but it's recently been applied to AI design. So we're starting from that as our framework. And with all of this, our goal is not to replace the humans in our support loop, but rather to extend and enhance our interactions with them. So the HCAI principles are safety, reliability, and trustfulness. So those are the 3 pillars that we always want to keep in mind when we're both creating and evaluating this chatbot. And what we've found by doing that is with a careful approach to creating these AI chatbots, we are really getting, I think, to a better product than we would otherwise that will be more useful and less frustrating for our users. So this is all the background of what we're starting with as our design principles and our evaluation principles. So with that, we've been building and evaluating a chatbot internally with our user base. So we are considering correctness, limitations of the bot, and as I will talk about soon, the framing of answers, which we've found to be extremely important. So a little bit about background on the bot development. The Massachusetts State has an AI initiative that's currently funding AI activities within the state. We have an upcoming AI compute resource funded by the Massachusetts AI Initiative, and this was funded out of the Massachusetts AI Hub. So the total work needed to get to like the initial functionality of the chatbot was quite substantial. So if you're looking at a similar initiative of creating a chatbot and evaluating a chatbot, keep in mind that it's not something currently that is what we have found at least to be deployable from like an out-of-the-box product. So in order to get to the bot that we're evaluating, it took about 14 weeks of work for 2 students, master's level students, I believe. So and they're at 34 hours weekly. And it took about 3 hours weekly of a full-time software engineer for guidance and mentorship. So that's a pretty substantial personnel investment to get to what I would consider pretty basic functionality, where we were happy with the answers it was giving, and with the tone and user interaction we had. We found that the early iterations of the bot required significant modification. So there was a lot of back and forth modification of the bot as development went on. And for anybody pursuing this direction, just keep in mind that what you get like at the first iteration of a bot is going to be pretty bad. Unless you have a wildly different experience than we did, like both tuning the information that the bot is pulling from and also figuring out how to make it answer in a way that is helpful and conducive for what you want it to accomplish does take a lot of time. One thing that we looked at quite a bit and that we found was quite frustrating for people was how the bot told people that it could not answer their question. And this was really an unexpected aspect of the bot interaction. So what we started with was basically if the bot interpreted a question as being off topic, it would give a pretty curt answer. So it would say, I'm sorry, but I can only assist with questions about Unity. And the example in here is asking what is the tallest mountain in the world. Now, that's a very clear question. That's a very clear example of an unrelated question. But what we found is that um, the bot often answered questions that were related to Unity, but were phrased in a way that were not like a clear match with something in the bot's user base. So we looked at other ways for the bot to say no. And one thing that Angela found was this framework for how a bot rejects a question. So we looked at the three different options. So the baseline here is what's in that first answer. The sorry, I can't assist with that. And then there are three other ways that a bot can answer. There's the diverting way where it says basically I can't talk about A, but I can discuss B, where B seems like it may be related. Factual is basically the same as baseline, but it has an additional explanation of like what it's doing as an AI language model. And then opinionated is it's basically saying the same thing as I'm sorry, I can't answer that, but with an additional like flair, I like to think about it. So it's not really saying anything different, it's we're rendering a judgment. So what we wanted to do was make sure that if the bot thought that it wasn't answering a question about Unity, it was going to give some useful next steps to the user. So if it didn't think that their question was in the knowledge base, it would say, would you like to ask me about topics like submitting jobs with Slurm, loading software modules, or managing storage? So trying to lead the user into questions that it could answer. And then one thing we found very important was the offer to redirect to a human to intervene. So we have this last line, I can also redirect you to the help desk to connect with our team to resolve your issue and provide any feedback you have. So that framing of the rejection we found is very important to reducing that feeling that a user is trapped in a bot loop or has a frustrating experience with support. And with that, I think I'm at my 10 minutes, so I'm going to end there. But I am happy to discuss further with our bot development. We're definitely still in the iteration and feedback stage of this. We have not deployed it widely to our users because there's several more steps that we want to sort out and refinements that we want to make, mostly in the area of extending what the bot is able to answer. Right now, we are looking at integrating our Slack support logs into the bot's knowledge base in a way that does not unintentionally expose any sort of like specific user information and stuff like that. So that's our next steps right now.
Super, thank you, Georgia. That's really interesting. I'm sure people will have some questions for you in a few moments once stage. So I've written about three down. So there's lots of exciting stuff I think to talk about there. So I'm going to hand straight over to David. So David has got a short talk for us as well. He's going to discuss using commercial AI models to automate quality assurance of metadata in digital catalog items. And just before I do hand over, I'll just give you a little bit of info about David. David's currently acting associate dean of the School of Integrative Science and Technology. Got that word out. Excellent. And Kenneth L. Estabrook, professor at Keene University. His extensive experience in computational science education, data science, and applying HPC and VR tools to various areas of scientific research. David's PI for an NSF award, and co-PI for an NSF cyber training project focused on developing a federated repository of HPC training materials. David's own research includes automated pollen grain detection, and he's developed open source tools for visualization and optimization. So, David, over to you, and let's hear about your use of commercial AI models. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I am going to shamelessly recycle slides from a talk I gave 2 weeks ago at supercomputing. But to set it up a little bit, just a bit about what we're trying to do. The cyber training project that I'm involved in, which is a multi-institution effort, what we want to do is collect information about libraries of training materials from different supercomputing centers, from different educational institutions, and other content maintainers, and create, I keep kind of going back to the old days of web rings and things like that, of federated collection of metadata about all of those things so that we can build better search tools initially and help connect things, as well as start doing things like gap analysis to help people find the materials that already exist better, and to help understand where new materials need to be created. And so my piece in this has been related to quality assurance. In particular, quality assurance of the metadata that's being submitted to us by the content developers and the library owners. We want to know, is the metadata right? Are the keywords right? How can we do that? And in particular, as we grow this project, how can we scale it? So we're really looking at AI as a tool that we can use to do that. So I'll go ahead and do a share here. Let's see. Can y'all see that? And also a little bit more context on the project, in terms of the organization of, so Keine University is an organization. We are we're a regional state university in northern New Jersey. We have recently created a PhD program in computer science, but it's in its first year. So we're primarily, I would say, a master's organization. And this is also, we like to incorporate research into our student training. So the two top authors here on the slide here, Habiba Morsi was a graduate student of mine, a master's student of mine last spring, who did the initial pass on this work working with me, and then Essence Toon is an undergrad working with me now, who's doing the next stage of the work. So all of this has been largely student created, with a lot of oversight along the lines of what does it take to do this. The project, as we're seeing here, is essentially a full year of master's level, advanced undergrad level student work with substantial supervision. And so as I had said, our project is about creating this repository. So the question is, can we use AI in a meaningful way to make this process of understanding whether the metadata that's coming in needs correction easier? We want to do this in a way where we're really respectful of the content developers. So we're thinking of this in terms of dashboard tools, things like that, to help give feedback, as opposed to, say, correcting or changing things. And So our approach was to say, well, okay, so people are sending us these metadata records, which includes a URL, summary, keywords, learning levels, other material. Can we start by looking at the raw URL, uh, look at that, gain information, do a low-level crawl, uh, pull information in, do transcripts on, say, embedded videos, pull PDFs down and do text extraction from it to build a better summary. So the first thing we wanted to know was, if we're going to see whether or not the submitted metadata is correct, can we actually look at the material first? We were using ChatGPT 3.5 for this, pretty much as a straight summarization tool. Again, so we have other parts of our project where people are looking at more advanced chatbot tools and newer technologies. Everything I'm doing here that I'm going to describe is just a straight API call with a chat completion. Not any, we're not doing any RAG models, not doing any custom trained models. This is just using the existing commercial tools with some prompt engineering to build some agents, and some other Python tools as well. So what does that actually look like? So our prompt that we submit is, again, so our first approach is we do a crawl to get a summary. And then once we have that summary, we create a prompt that says, evaluate the accuracy of the keywords metadata tag on a scale of 1 to 5. Feed in the metadata format and give a question of response format. That we want the response in JSON following a certain approach. And then we submitted this, and we were testing this with ChatGPT. At the time, what were kind of some of the standard models we could use? 3.5, 4.1 nano, 4.1 mini, and 4.0 mini, I believe. Again, trying to keep things also as well affordable. So not necessarily doing 5.1 through the API with a full reasoning model, lower level models. We found 3.5 was absolutely adequate for summarization. We never had to go any further than that. Then we were looking at, again, what were the different levels of commercial models we could use with a fairly straightforward prompt, and what would we get out of it? Whoops, wrong direction. Having a little trouble with my screen here, sorry. For some reason, my screen does not want to scroll in the forward direction. If I do present as opposed to, do y'all see that? Good. Now I go. Okay. Now I can get to the next screen. Sorry. My scroll wheel is not working. And the response we were getting was, basically what we asked for. We got keywords, score, we got the reasoning that we asked for, we got a suggested set of keywords, and additional metadata fields. So one of the things we wanted to know was, again, without any other crazy prompting, could we, and without going to some of these things like MVC protocols, things like that, could we, with straight prompt engineering, get a JSON formatted response in the format we wanted, in a way that we could incorporate into workflows? And while we probably will use some of these newer technologies as we move forward, I will say, of things that went right and went wrong, we have never had a single response from the chatbot that failed to give us back the information we wanted in the format we wanted, in terms of, what are the descriptors in the JSON format correct? Was it following JSON format? Were the pieces that we asked for there? Every single run we have 100% of responses matching the format we asked for. Where things get a little stranger, again, one of the things you find with these AI projects is you don't always, you think your prompt will give you exactly what you want. What we tended to get was a lot of extra information. We asked our prompt to evaluate just the keywords, and across the board, every model we tried gave us the keywords, and gave us every other metadata field we asked for, including things that we added as kind of supplementary material and then treated that as metadata to review as well. So we got a lot of extra information, but that's okay. And then once we had that, what we looked at was um, as kind of a precursor to, I think what we want to ultimately do is human level review, where we can do things like item analysis and understand, or sorry, uh, uh, to analyze across different reviewers and make sure we have consistent human reviews, and then compare those against the agents. Instead, we kind of did a correlation across multiple models to see, do the models agree or not. And a lot of the models agreed. So I would say about 80% of the time, it didn't really matter what model we used. We got very consistent results, maybe a 4 versus a 5, as opposed to all 5s or all 4s. Reasoning was straightforward. When we had good information to feed to the chatbot in the first place, we tended to get good results back. So in an example here of one in which all 4 models agreed, and we went with 3.5, 4.1 nano, 4.1 mini, 4.0 mini. Not only did the score come back similar, but the reasoning came back similar, except we started noticing this trend, which we're investigating further, which it appears to be that models that allow for more reasoning, we were seeing issues of what I would describe as overthinking, right? And that's something we're working to correct in our future versions, is how to manage a more fully featured model kind of going off topic. Whereas we did find that the simpler models honestly tended to give more straightforward answers. If we found that the metadata that was provided often was sometimes a little bit more sparse, we didn't have enough to go on. This was a situation where, particularly if we're adding to it a summary from the website, where the summary might be grabbing in things like, we were finding things like, oh, here's a glossary from the site. How do we control for that? Here's a link to the site's homepage and information on the clusters that are there. How do we control from that in the learning material? So if we had less to work with the metadata, we often tended to find much more disagreement. And again, this was something where consistently the lower level models didn't try to overthink things and could kind of handle that a little bit better. So we are seeing that with more reasoning models, we are going to have more control over what we feed to it, as well as how we manage this issue of overthinking. Time-wise, I figure I'll stop right there, but that's just kind of an example of what we're doing with this. Definitely this idea of AI and automation for serving up search and analysis is something we see as a huge part of where we're going with this. But that's probably a good summary of where we are right now with this quality assurance piece.
Great, thank you, David. I mean, for me, there was a bit of a common theme between some of the things that you said and Georgia said, and I think I could probably sum it up as, it's not as easy as you think it might be at the beginning. There are things that I think that both of you have found, oh, this is a bit more complex than perhaps would have hoped. So that was an interesting bit of insight there. So it would be cool if anybody in the audience, if you've got any questions for either David or Georgia, and we can have a little bit of a chat, a bit of a deep dive into some of the work that they've been doing. So over to you. Any questions for us? Either. Oh, there we go. Scott's got a list, I bet.
I had a question for you, Georgia. You'd mentioned that, one of the things that was the issue was the way that the bot was responding to say no, basically. And in that, you'd said that this was something that it sounded like you got feedback from users that this was a problem. And so I was kind of curious what your user feedback mechanism was, like how you were testing this out as you went along. Was it just kind of people in-house? Were you doing this formally? Did you just have a user base that was willing to give this a whirl and tell you they don't like being told no? Or I was just kind of wondering how that feedback loop worked for you.
Yeah, so I started by testing it internally with our facilitation teams, some student workers that are not, necessarily experts in research computing. So kind of with friendly internal users at first. And then we have designed a study that we're currently doing data collection for to do a more formal interview process as part of like the full evaluation of the bot. So I'm pulling up the slide that has that design on it. But essentially, we are doing guided interviews. So they are given four tasks to accomplish with the assistance of the bot, but without like person intervention to lead them through it. And we have pulled users from a variety, I cannot find the slide, a variety of expertise levels. Um, okay, I found the slide. We sent it. These are the tasks that. Oh, and now I did not go to the right slide. All right. So these are in action right now. I'm getting these studies, but this is the format of the interview. So we start with very basic, and then we move up to more advanced. But this is all stuff intentionally designed that we know is in our documentation. So I'd like to think that this is almost a optimistic view of the use of the chatbot because it is very controlled. It is stuff that we know that the bot has access to the information for. And what we're looking at here is for when we're watching the participant, they're narrating out loud what they are thinking when they are navigating through the process, uh, giving verbal feedback live as they're interacting with the chatbot, and then yeah. So that's the format of the larger formal study. Initial tests were more informal than that, more just working with our facilitation team and students within it. So this is an example of some tests. So when facilitator give the feedback, I try to be really pushy about it, to try to give something on how to circumvent the 8-hour time limit, and it didn't give me anything, which is good. And then another one where we found the answer was pretty helpful for why did my job crash. But there were some darker sides to that as well. And one piece of feedback from another facilitator was, I can never tell if the issue is how these things work, meaning the chatbots, or if our documentation isn't clear. And that one was one of our big takeaways as well. But for specifically the user feedback where the decline wasn't helpful, that came mostly from our student workers, where if they thought they were asking a question that was about Unity, but phrased in a way that it couldn't find the answer and it just said, this isn't relevant, that seemed discouraging. So that's one thing that we wanted to fix before it went to the larger user base. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Super. Have we any more questions for either Georgia or David? I've got a question for David, if you don't mind. So
Sure.
one of the points you made, obviously you were talking about pinging an API, and obviously there's a cost involved in this.
Mhm.
And you obviously, you need to have money and some grant funding in order to be able to do this. And I'm just wondering whether, in terms of affordability, whether you'd any experience or you've got any comment on perhaps using smaller local models, and whether that's something that you'd toyed with.
So absolutely, and I'll say on the cost side of things, and this is one of the things we really wanted to know, like what can we do with, say, the 3.5 model, the 4.0 Nano, and the
Mm.
4.0 Mini model, and I think they're moving now to like the Chat GPT 5 non-reasoning model. I think is kind of what's going to eventually replace 3.5. Um, the cost on that is, at least for the scale of what we were doing, negligible, pennies. Keeping it, and I think this is why it's so important to realize when you can get away with one of the cheaper commercial models.
Mm.
Um, I set up the account that my student has been working with a $30 balance
Oh,
somewhere
right.
last January. Um, and saw almost no decline until one weekend. Like I said, it becomes important, where my student at the time uh, ran a full, what was at the time the best model you get, the 4.0, full 4.0,
Mm,
blew through all of that in a weekend on
wow.
one run. And suddenly I'm getting all of your account has no money left in it. I said, make sure you switch back to the 3.5. She did. Uh, I put in another $30. I checked my account balance today. And again, so this would have been around March, $30 in March. My account balance today was $27. Um,
Okay.
so, so if you can stick with the non-reasoning models and they're good enough for your needs, uh,
Mm,
even at like kind of a larger scale, um, I do think, in that situation, things are very affordable. Um, but if you need to go beyond that, that's where, running something locally might make sense. Having said
mm,
that, if you're going to run something locally that gets what you want to get out of, say, a truly larger model, you've probably got to have a fairly serious resource locally. So if you're already
mm.
connected to a situation where you've got time on a cluster you can do this with, where you can throw, 20 GPUs at the problem, um, then that might make sense. But if you've
Mm.
got the budget to do that, you've also probably got the budget for the API calls. Um, but what I would say is, for a lot of these things, if you don't need complicated reasoning, uh, even the commercial tools are going to be a lot more affordable than people realize.
Good. And I think, I guess that's important as well. If people want to experiment, then you don't
Mhm.
need a $3 million NSF grant in order to be able to
No.
afford to do this. This is departmental petty cash type
Mhm.
work potentially. Cool, Georgia.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. The estimate, our bot is not live all the time right now because it's in testing. We spin it up when we need it, and then we shut it down afterwards to not run up more of a bill accidentally. But the estimated cost is about $400 a month, and because of that, we're looking at moving it on-prem. And additionally, if we move it on-prem, then we're a little bit more comfortable, like giving it our Slack logs and stuff like that as well.
Mm,
So data ownership and privacy is also a consideration here. But we were using the Amazon OpenSearch serverless for much of it, and that's where
okay.
the bulk of the cost comes in.
So is that a bit more expensive, or is that more expensive, less expensive than using perhaps the OpenAI API or something on Azure? Do you know? Do you have any
Um,
idea of?
I'm not sure. So one thing we are also looking at right now, over the summer when this work was done, UMass did not have their GenAI platform rolled out fully, but that is now rolled out, and I'm working with the team that does that, which is interestingly also the team that provided the FTE for this work, to see if we could use that as the backing and just roll it in as an agent into that work instead, and retain the control we need over it, with that as the backing and what the cost would look like there. But we may want to move it on-prem anyway, because as
Mhm.
an HPC center, we have
Why
like
not?
some Grace
Yes.
hoppers and stuff like that we could host it off of relatively straightforwardly, I think. But yeah, the cost is definitely a consideration. And it's the unpredictability of the cost that's kind of the most difficult thing to deal with, because as an academic department, we can't absorb like a sudden $1,000
Mm,
bill one
yeah.
month and like a $10 bill the next. And it's just all over the map.
There you go. Thank you. I've potentially got some questions for us to consider. But if there's anything else anybody wants to discuss that's perhaps a little bit more general, or they've got any experiences of their own experiments, then the floor is open if anybody wants to make a contribution. If not, I've got a few things up my sleeve. That's a no then. Okay, so a few thoughts then. So certainly in the conversations I've had and the conversations we've had as a team over the course of the last few months, there are definitely a whole bunch of experiments that people are keen to try and things that they want to do. Um, but what they look like and how we can best share experiences with each other is still yet a little bit open. So I put together a few questions, just things to get us thinking a little bit, and hopefully, can you see those questions? I can never work out whether I'm sharing properly. Right. Okay. Good. So there's three questions really, and I guess the first one is sort of based a lot around the work that George has told us about. So get this thing up and running, and hopefully users are going to be able to generate Sloan scripts or MPI skeletons in seconds. And for those of us that have been involved in HPC education and training for a while, we've probably got a bunch of workshops that we would traditionally have taught those skills and taken people on a bit of a journey through developing them. So if chatbots like this can develop those scripts and skeletons in seconds, and better still explain them, should we just stop teaching all of that from scratch and start teaching people how to critique and verify code instead, which I think is a little bit towards the end of what David was talking about as well. So I'm just wondering what people's thoughts are on that. Did it change how we do the whole HPC user education and training? Ludovic, hello there. How are you?
Good. So yeah, thank you for all the presentations. Taking a lot of notes. This is a question I have given some thought of quite some time ago now, before I became really that trendy, where I think indeed the skill that is going to become more and more valuable is going to transition from the production of material to their review, which is one of the concerns that was mentioned as well by Georgia, I believe, which is making sure that you can trust what has been produced. And we all have experienced now a certain number of times where AI produces something that is not entirely aligned with truth, should we say? And yeah, but however, I am not sure this would be incompatible with continuing to teach the underlying skills to produce the code. I believe there might be, or my take would be they are actually part in developing the ability to review the code. Even, for example, to know if the memory layout is a pointer on something or an array of something else, or pointers on pointers. These remain underlying skills that underpin what is needed eventually to evaluate and review, according to me.
Okay, that's. I think I probably agree with you, actually. I wonder if anyone else has got any thoughts on that, where you stand on this. Should we just give it all up to AI and bother and just bother ourselves at the higher level, or do we still need those underpinning skills?
I'll say a little something about both of the students that were working with me on this. And both of them absolutely were using generative AI to write code on this. When we got to the kind of the second semester of work and realized that our crawler summarizer needed to be much better and needed to be rewritten, um, my student and I sat down and decided to upgrade our generative AI coding tools and switched from kind of a lot of kind of autofill in Colab or in ChatGPT, and set up VS Code with Codex on
Mm.
it and kind of full control over the package. Um, in terms of student skills, I think the students are going to be using these tools anyway, right? So how do we teach them to do it correctly? Um, you know, I think all of us have seen where things are with student hiring right now as students are
Yeah.
moving out in the workforce. If we don't train the students to use the tools and to use them in a way that's trustworthy and ethical, right? We're just not preparing them for the job. So yeah, I think absolutely. I don't know if it completely replaces. I hope it doesn't. But this whole idea that we've had in computational science communities for years and HPC communities of verification and validation, right, as a
Mm,
part of what we do,
yeah.
right, and we use a lot of black box codes already in computational science. So that concept is not entirely new. I think it needs to be revitalized and taught more strongly.
Mm,
And I think for even in the computer science side of things, this idea of focusing more on software engineering. How do we think about unit testing, right? So
mm.
validation, I think, does become a much more important skill as we're all going to be using a lot more black box code than we'd like.
Yeah, I think you're right, and there really is no way of avoiding the hard stuff, I think. Um, and yeah, so this whole concept of vibe coding that we hear about is something that does worry me a little. Anna, over to you. Hi, Anna.
Hi, all. Yes, I mean, I think if you use those, chatbots, for recording, like one of the first things that you notice and realize, you really need to know what do you, ask for, right? Because the chatbots only do things like the better things you get with the better qualification and framing of the problem that you want to solve, right? And that already implies like knowing actually how coding works in a certain level, right? And then, as many folks mentioned on the call, like somebody needs to check this work that is produced, with the chatbots, right? Because we know how much they, hallucinate still in many ways, right? But also maybe as a last point, coding is also a way like to teach somebody, how to think, right? In a structural way, how to think about, decomposition, abstraction, logic, causality, right? So it is all of those things. But I would say also maybe, okay, as a last thing, so the real workflows, right, that people are, working on, they are not just, functions or classes, or something like that, like the chatbot can help you with, it usually involves some larger, architecture, and the data models, and the, security that you guys, mentioned, privacy, and things like that. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ludovic.
I think there is something we started to touch on. I think I would call it the trustworthiness of what's being shown and what's being taught as the AI become more prominent in our ecosystem and the teaching ecosystem. And that got me to think to a feedback we've had from POSI that maybe your centers could relate to, where we have started to survey staff about, okay, what happens if we now start to use AI in a more streamlined version at POSI? And one of the feedback has been shared by a certain number of staff is the perception that the expertise has now left POSI staff and has been delegated or offloaded to an AI platform. And we connect to the topic about the students and the next generation of computer scientists who indeed are unlikely to be programmers, but to be AI users. And that's going to do, I think, a massive shift in the expertise we'll have at our disposal if we do not have a pipeline for talent transfer effectively. Because we might end up in a situation where the people who are supposed to be the reference and the knowledgeable people savvy on a certain topic now have delegated that knowledge to the tool that initially they were using as an intern, providing guidance just as a productivity multiplier, and which has now effectively taken over control and we're now behind AI, dependent on the AI producing content we're no longer able to produce ourselves. The example I always give is a calculator just makes your life faster, but if we take the calculator away from you, you still know how to do 5 times 7. The other big difference is a calculator will never give you the wrong answer. AI will. So these risks, when taken all together, create a certain urgency for us to really have a sturdy framework when all this will no longer be optional and just us playing around or trying new things, because at some point it's really going to become streamlined and mainstream, and I think we're going to face a certain number of challenges.
I think you're right, and that sort of leads me on to my question 3 there, which is something a few people have mentioned, that there might be a danger if we don't somehow carry on teaching the basics, that users end up being sort of co-pilots of the AI rather than the way around we want it to be. In the most extreme case, they might not understand inefficient or indeed downright dangerous code without that sort of critical layer. And simply because the chatbot suggested it, they just end up, typing it on. Or worst case, in VS Code, you just click the little accept button, don't you? You don't even need to type anything in or copy paste anymore. You just let it throw everything into your terminal for you and click go. So I think there is something that we're missing, which is about critical thinking. And at work there have been discussions about critical AI literacy, and to me it sounds like uncritical AI illiteracy, that we're not really thinking about what this means and how we go about training and teaching our graduates and employees. But we've coped with other advances in technology. I'm sure we'll cope with this one as well. Georgia.
I find the conversation around AI really interesting in the way that we teach and evaluate students. So when I was going through K-12, it was like the early dawn of the internet and like Wikipedia becoming a thing. And we were always warned, never trust anything you see on Wikipedia. So this seems like the next step of that evolution as well. And what happened with like the internet coming online with like pedagogy and how you teach and evaluate students is that moving up Bloom's taxonomy from just like the rote memorization and regurgitation up to higher levels there was really the solution in how to evaluate and teach students. So I think I have the tentative view that we just have to move up the next step. So now instead of just being able to look up facts, you can use AI to do some, basic analysis or basic execution of a concept. So we may need to move up to yet higher rungs into like the evaluating, creating steps. And what AI really is good at forcing students to do, whether they think they're doing it or not, is that evaluating step. So when an AI generates an answer for you, it's on you to figure out, is this what it actually is supposed to be doing? And I find that when I have Copilot on, if I'm trying to code something, it can be helpful, but I feel like I actually have to think harder in a lot of ways because I'm constantly trying to think, okay, is what it just generated for me what I actually need to be doing? But I'm able to make those judgments because I have the background information and I could write it myself if I wanted to. So it's really
absolutely.
How do we effectively get students to make those evaluations correctly and be in those, top rungs of the taxonomy?
Yeah, and you can make those evaluations because you've got years of experience already. You've already done it the hard way, and so for you, to borrow Ludovic's term, it is a multiplier. But I guess for those new graduates, those undergraduates at the moment, they've not done things the hard way. And the point you made about search engines, I remember having this discussion like 25 odd years ago that we should discourage students from using search engines because they won't develop critical information literacy skills. And I'm convinced that when I was an undergraduate, there were discussions being had about how we should still learn how to look things up on microfilm and not use the automated library databases. So yeah, it gets interesting, doesn't it? It gets really, really interesting. Where do we draw the line, and how do we keep moving up that Bloom's pyramid? Anyway, we're approaching the end of our session. We've had some really interesting discussions and comments. What would be really cool, just as a bit of a parting shot? So we're very keen to continue to support our community. I've popped a little link in the chat, and that should give you, providing I've set it up right, a link to this little hack pad. What we'd like to know is what should we do next? What additional information, maybe additional seminars and workshops would you like to see us working on? And what can we share with you, and what can we encourage you to share as well? Sharing a summary of what we've discussed tonight. I think we can do that. There is a recording, isn't there? So, or there will be a recording. So if you've got any thoughts, please do pop them in the chat. And sorry, in the hack pad, and then we can take those on board.
Trying to figure out how to generate a direct invitation link, but in the Slack channel, we have a channel now for discussing GenAI in education. So that is also a place where we can continue discussing. Cool. But maybe I should ask AI how to generate a join link.
Or just look it up in the instructions. Do it the old-fashioned way.
There is something that's going to be, I think, very interesting to see in the next few years as AI become more and more prominent. Because one day I was discussing a lot with AI, and I said, okay, so what am I going to do in a few years' time? What will humans be doing still? And it actually, I think it gave a great answer. Things that humans will not need another human for, but will want another human for. So somehow when you can start to relate, I believe it's Georgia's slides that were mentioning the frustration, because yeah, it's the same for customer service. As soon as you have even a simple question and you have these 15 pages of links to go through before you can talk to a human being, by the time you reach them, you're already not happy. So even for teaching, I think there is a lot to be transmitted through pedagogy and actual human interactions that AI cannot reproduce, and even openly admits it's not what it's been designed for. So maybe we have a lot of value to transfer or even develop in these areas if we're maybe a bit underdeveloped there.
Yeah. I mean, George's point about frustration actually made me think about an interaction I had with my bank's app's AI support chatbot last week, and I nearly threw the thing out the window. It was something really, really simple I wanted to do. I think just how to go about changing some details. That was it. And the rubbish it came back with was just insane. It was very frustrating. Clearly, it was designed, by someone who was having a very bad Friday. That's all I can think.
What's tricky with AI is as soon as you have a mistake. Oh, sorry, Georgia, I think I interrupted you.
Oh no, go ahead.
Thank you. When AI makes a mistake, it just moves on like, oh yeah, you're right, sorry, I just said this, it was wrong. And it moves with the same level of conviction. And that, once you encounter this 2-3 times in a row, or you then say, no, you already said before, you cannot say that because you just said this. And sometimes you see in the same sentence, 2 parts of that sentence are contradicting each other. And when you start to face these situations, you get a lot more distance from the AI tool. And you're thinking, well, actually, it would be nice if I had someone I could use as a reference telling me, no, that's true, that's false. So I think we will still have that need, but users probably need to realize that by themselves on their own.
Absolutely. So We are just about on the hour. Thank you very much, everybody, today for your contributions, and a big, big thank you to Georgia and to David for their contributions. A round of applause. Thank you very much. Oh, Scott's clicked the button for round of applause. There we go. Well done. I knew there was one somewhere. So we'll take your comments on board. The outputs from today will be shared, and we hope that this is just the beginning of an interesting set of discussions on this theme. Thank you very much indeed, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good day.